Background. I'm Elizabeth. I am a consultant doing some political and global business strategy analysis, and I find a lot of comparison or connection between what happens in politics and decisions that businesses need to make. This week, I wanted to dive into a specific topic that was addressed last month with regard to the new German government, specifically the Green Party and Habeck. As I mentioned before in my previous video, their heavy-handed human rights views will be enacted potentially about business decisions with China. But I do not think this particular question, this particular instance that was on a big topic last month, is related to that. So I want to dive into this specific question. Last month, as this new coalition government was coming into their new roles, the Taiwanese semiconductor company GlobalWafers was in the middle of trying to have this acquisition of Siltronic, which is a German company. And there's a lot of questions and speculations about what Habeck would do and why. So we want to really get into the why, because I think it's important to understand the different layers of this conversation. And a lot of the critics of Habeck will have very specific criticism about this particular deal and float it out more generally about his policies for German companies. Let me get into the background here. There's a couple of things to take into account. For those of you who don't know, in recent years, the EU has implemented a lot of regulations and restrictions on the kinds of and how many acquisitions China can have in the EU. It's specifically targeted around specific areas of industry that the EU does not want Chinese companies to have large holdings in Europe over critical industries that are related to infrastructure, healthcare, transportation, things like this. So communications, telecom, there are a lot of industries that fall in this realm, and I've been contacted several times in the last 6 months by clients asking about this particular topic. And because deals come up and they want to know what their chances are. This does mean that the EU, and in this case Germany, has to approve any merger that takes place where a Chinese company wants to purchase a European company. This particular industry is even more broadly being scrutinized beyond that particular set of restrictions. So yes, that set of restrictions is in place for all Chinese companies. It has nothing to do with human rights. It has to do with the EU wanting to stay in control of infrastructure companies for solid reasons. I don't disagree with that necessarily. The second question that came up with this particular deal, because it is a Taiwanese company, people speculated that the Green Party may have some issue about the one China policy, that they may not approve it because it was a company in Taiwan and not China, and it would insult China. Again, I really don't think this is related to this particular question at all, in my opinion. I think for Taiwanese companies, it is a delicate time, to say it nicely. And I mentioned that the Green Party does have these very heavy-handed human rights policies that we'll see how they go about navigating how to implement those. They do see that China business practices fall outside of their guidelines and want to do more to implement that in those global policies. Again, don't think this is related to this deal. So I was thinking more along the lines of it being less about the one China policy and the uncertainty about the Taiwanese government. Because if anyone wanted to look at that particular situation and how other countries might respond to Taiwanese companies, China is being very aggressive toward Taiwan. Right now, Taiwanese government, Taiwanese companies may have less human rights issues than mainland China business practices. However, and there may be less regulation about companies in Taiwan in terms of mergers and acquisitions in Europe than mainland China companies. However, there's a lot of political uncertainty right now. That's just sadly, the unfortunate repercussions of that kind of political uncertainty and instability going on right now. There's a lot of questions what the future of Taiwan will look like. China is not helping that, I will say. So this particular deal, I really looked at this and thought the timing is totally off. However, I also think this question about the global semiconductor industry market is a much bigger question than Germany. So Siltronic is a German company that is the fourth largest in the world. And critics think that Habeck's policy to restrict mergers and acquisitions of German companies hurts German companies. As I said, I never approached this from any kind of specialized background in this particular deal. I'm not quite sure how Siltronic remaining the fourth largest semiconductor company in the world necessarily hurts Germany. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I guess the hypothetical situation is that they merge forces, become the first company in the world, and somehow Germany benefits from that because the company is still partially located here. I am not an expert in this specific deal. I just think that it's a bad example to use for that particular criticism of Habeck. So as I mentioned, the Green Party is going to have a lot of these new heavy-handed policies. Critics, as I mentioned, have this specific criticism that it hurts German companies not to consider these kinds of deals that are presented. But honestly, whoever decided discussing this deal and decided trying to do it while there was a change in the German government just doesn't understand basic timing. They presented this deadline on the 31st of January, and all of the new government has moved into their new roles in January. It was not a lot of time. The clock just ran out. So I think if anyone even wanted to try this deal, to have more time to discuss it would have been just to wait for this government to get settled. So I think the timing of this deal was not bad. So I've included these headlines from Handelsblatt in German and English for our viewers, in case you have any questions about what I'm talking about. Please refer to these headlines. As I mentioned, this was a Taiwanese semiconductor company that wanted to acquire the German semiconductor company Siltronic. It needed approval by Germany. It needed approval by the European Union. And the deadline to have that approval was January 31st, which a new government in Germany just started in January. And the clock ran out. And his ministry has even mentioned there just wasn't time to do all of the due diligence and to review everything. So I think whoever organized this deal just wasn't very smart in their timing, is the bottom line, everything else considered. But I did want to address this because it does bring up a lot of global issues. It does bring up a lot of bigger political questions. As I mentioned, there were a lot of other speculations about other reasoning, whether it be human rights, whether it be one China policy versus Taiwan. I heard a lot of speculation around this particular deal, and I just wanted to make it clear what address each of those particular issues and make it clear what I thought the real issue here with this particular deal was. So thank you so much for joining me for this more in-depth analysis. This is a really specific example that piggybacks onto my discussion last week about the new coalition, giving this coalition time to sort out their policies. I think this question about what factors will go into decisions about mergers and acquisitions of German companies is going to get some criticism. This is the kind of thing the AfD loves to harp on and maybe make these kinds of deals about something that it's not about. So, like, for example, saying, well, this hurt Germany that you didn't let this acquisition take place. I don't know that it did necessarily. They never back anything up on their side with any kind of evidence. So it's a lot of talk. It's a lot of blowing smoke. But I hope that moving forward, we can discuss this new coalition, the decisions they make, and reality-driven criticisms instead of criticizing things based on stories that aren't based in reality. Thank you so much. This has been an in-depth look into the new coalition government in Germany about this particular deal. I look forward to meeting again with you soon on more interesting topics. Have a great day.